Hello and welcome back to another Final Fantasy XIV walk-along. This time we are going across all 4 planets in the Cosmic Exploration content. We are going to be starting on Sinus Ardorum, and right away we are greeted by some debris from Heimdall. This was probably quite the surprise to many of people when this part of the zone was unlocked, to see part of Heimdall's make it all the way over to the moon. In a few tidbits of lore, we discovered that this may actually be debris from a vessel in the zone Mare Lamatorium. And the lore on this vessel is that it was launched by the Alligans to observe Bahamut's prison, and eventually later destroyed during Bahamut's release. As we go our way up here, we could see this massive wall of Aether crystals, or at least what appear to be like Aether-attuned crystal. It's hard to exactly tell without getting a closer look, and we never really get any clear answer as to what these are, but they make for quite the nice sight regardless. Our route for cosmic exploration is going to be a little different than the previous walk-along. Due to how the cosmic exploration zones are structured, there ends up being a lot of dead zone where there's just really nothing going on at all. And I assume this was their attempt to make these massive unexplored planets feel gargantuan in size and scope, and really feel like you're traveling across a large section to explore these planets, and not simply contained in a smaller location. While this ends up being a cool idea, in reality it ends up making quite a bit of the zone feel almost hollow. So for that reason, the way we will be crossing these zones is by using the Cosmoliners, as I feel that will give us not only some great vistas as we travel along each of them, but also make these areas feel like we're exploring them as the devs intended us to do so, as the Cosmoliners end up being a core component in how we rebuild each zone of these planets to suit the exploration's needs. When I was doing some routing for these, the earlier runs that I tested on did not use the Cosmoliners when running through this first planet. I came to the conclusion that it would probably be well over 4 hours due to how some of these planets are structured. If you look way in the distance you can see some golden glows. That is the opposite of the playable zone for this location, to put into perspective how big the scale of this location is. And we will be making our way there eventually. If you're ever looking for a great place to get starry night screenshots, this is definitely a location, as the weather tends to cooperate for the most part outside of a few situations, and you don't have to wait till nighttime either for the stars to appear. Over here is Palus Arsenici, or the Marsh of, which is essentially a marsh full of arsenic, of all things. And that's just kind of crazy. A lot of the planets have extremely toxic waters for one reason or another that make them almost uninhabitable. We'll see how we end up utilizing those later when we make it to the opposite side of this zone. Here we're passing through Weddingways Burrow. It is an experimental garden, and often you can find various fates here that indicate just how out of control the fungi in this location is. Even on the place where it's been born of fruit, it still is extremely invasive. Not unlike our real world reflection of various fungi that we can find. Here we can see briefly down into one of the crevasses scattered all over the surface of the moon. These are another part of the reason why walking through this zone would take such an immense amount of time out. They are scattered in seemingly random places in a way that they really, really want you to use the Cosmoliners. Now we'll be heading over to Lunar Nadir and taking the stairwell down a deer lift. If you watched my walk along where I walked to the Waking Sands, you might recall in Horizon that there was a similar cargo lift, though given that it was made in A Realm Reborn, it had no function. And hey, we finally got one. A functioning cargo lift that is going up and down, though sadly we still can't ride on the cargo lifts. In the distance here, you can see an isolated path going up to a valley. And in this location is just some various flora. If I recall, there is a few fates that occur here, though nothing major of notes. I don't believe there is a red alert, but we won't be walking back there as the flora in that location is not unique, and we will be seeing much of it along the way to the left side. This cave is very bizarre, and not many of the quest descriptions here give a very clear answer as to what of might occurred here at one point. So a lot of it is up to visual storytelling and interpretation of the players. Here in the center, we can see a water aspected crystal, or at least what appears to be one. So it makes me think that maybe at some point this place was dense with moisture and they were cultivating all the various flora and fungi in this location. Or it could possibly be that this section may have been completely flooded at one point. Though this is just my speculation, as I couldn't find any info on it. Maybe there is some and I overlooked it. Here we have arrived at the Aetherial Falls, a location that, while looks quite relaxing, is not a liquid you would want to go anywhere near. It's kind of goopy. Huh. Well, anyway. Now we're going to be walking back up the lift stairwell, and you get to see just how funny it is, again, when a game does not have the resources or time to ensure the character takes every step at a time. Here we're passing the Fallen Tears. These various craters have this pleasant copper material lining all of them. And we'll be walking up to them just to take a bit of a closer look. Now we are finally arriving at Calabash Cove. the complete opposite side of Sinus Ardorum. As we get closer here to these water sources, they are called Hollow Harbor, and they contain the arsenic liquid that we saw on the opposite side of this location. In all of these, you can see these machines. These are called Rainbow Crystal Purifiers, and they're being used to cleanse the spring water in these locations. Arsenic is something that can be found in many water sources in real life, and it is a very treatable thing to remove from water sources, depending on the severity of it. Most often, you see this being treated with reverse osmosis. It's cool to see a purification process being reflected on such a hostile location to our benefit. Now we're going to make our way back to the main camp, so just enjoy the ride. Here he is, this Loperit, and I believe he is the cause of many of our problems in the future planets. I like to refer to him as Touchingway, as he just can't help himself but touch literally everything possible. We will be seeing him on other planets, so be ready for that. We're going to head upstairs real quick so we can take a look around at the finished base state of this location. Few vending machines here, very reflective of some of the stuff we see in Solution 9. And the Loperits describe this first location as more of a settlement than necessarily a base of operations. So seeing these various vending machines is a equal sign of that. When you see me walking along in many of these various locations, it often seems like it can be very confusing, especially if you aren't the one routing them. A lot of times I will use landmarks to help find my way as signs of where to go. And a landmark you'll see me use in every single base of operations that we go to across these 4 planets will be these Loperits teaching the Mamets how to dance, as they're always on the side of the location where the starship is placed that will help us get to our next planet. We're going to take one last look around before we head over to the next location. Now we'll be heading to Phaenna. This is probably my second favorite planet, and in terms of lore building, it is indeed my favorite. It does a lot to build on the base exploit. Over here we can see Jaromir, the Loremaster of this location, and all the planets do have a Loremaster. In case you missed some of the story quest lines here, they can help give you a little backstory on some of the locations that we visited throughout here, as well as just opening your infrastructure index in the unique UI for these locations. Here, one of my cats decided to interrupt me. I got a little stuck. These two dummies happen to be guiding me along my way. Here we're passing over an Aetherial river of silicon, presumably, that has been completely encased into its crystalline structure. This place later on gets quite confusing to route, as there's a lot of unnecessary Cosmoline paths that just kind of lead you to similar locations. Over here to the side is an extremely deep trench that we are going to be walking down into, so you can see just how massive this really is. This place is called the Capsule Chasm, and inside it you can see many of these large orbs of various sizes that are full of water inside of them. Some are said to even be holding lakes worth of water. Here we can see one of the many fauna in this location that has been completely crystallized over. Eventually we'll be going down the hill and seeing a tree as well. Here we can see the tree in question. It has a bizarre design to it with all these smaller branching buds on the innermost side of it, while the outside is covered in some sort of silicone mass. And even the fruit here is glowing. One of the cooler fauna we'll see in this location. We've reached the basin, and now you can see just how far down we've traveled. Now we will be taking the Cosmoliner all the way up, so you can see how much faster we travel ground on the... Even with this thing making a looping pattern, we still make distance at a rate way faster than walking. If you observe some of the many structures and tools in this location, you can see that the Loperites have implemented the glass and silicon resources of this planet to convert all their tools into using solar energy technology. It is one of the cooler parts of the world building we get on this cosmic exploration journey as we go through the various locations, and helps emphasize why we are able to travel to these planets and why we are gathering all these resources on them. Our entire purpose on this planet has very much been for energy developments, and you can see that reflected in many of the quest's lore here. Over here, you can see another area that was restricted at one point, if I recall correctly. And you can see some of the various drones in this location cooling the silicon lavas in order to help form a bridge for us to go over and harvest the various crystals that you see scattered in this location. We are currently passing through Saltpeter Shore. Saltpeter is really interesting as it's used in many techniques to help strengthen glass. Though, strangely, I could not find any mention of saltpeter actually being used here in the silicons and glasses. And instead, the only source of saltpeter I could find was used in a crafting quest to craft carpets? Yeah, I guess Square Enix kind of missed the mark on that one. On the left here, you can see the Slumping Plunge, another crystallized silicon waterfall. Silicon Fall? Aetherial Fall? And as we pass this, we will be heading into an entire cave system that has been completely hardened from ceiling to floor. The silicon materials here must dry very quickly. Not only that, they must be quite viscous to be able to stick to the ceiling and create this bored out cave with very little interference in between. As we're exiting this cave, we get to see the fruits of our labor for this planet. The Stellascope, which is being used to search for intelligent life. The Stellascope almost feels like a setup for future content beyond cosmic exploration, and it leaves a nice avenue for the devs if they want to use this as a tool for explaining how we're getting to certain locations and finding them. As the whole of cosmic exploration really feels like that's something they're doing. And given the ease of access is to get through these locations with very little level restrictions, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see them somehow make mention of it in the future. Again, here you can see Loperitz and company guiding the way to us. And now we're heading to Oizys? 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 Let me know how you pronounce it. Personally, I will be going with Oizys because I think that sounds silly and very incorrect. So I mentioned the previous planet was very confusing to route, but in a bit of a funny twist, I ended up doing the entire route for this planet backwards on accident. And I got about 2 Cosmoliners in and decided, let's see what happens anyway. Here we can see these massive slanted cliffs. I recommend making note of these as we'll be talking about them later towards the end of this station. And here we are, first view of the gravitational anomaly and what has become the bane of this location's destruction. But there may be more than meets the eye to this. As stated in a later quest in this location, it is implied that these gravitational anomalies may have been created by the people who live here. Now we'll be heading into the Emerald Echoes. In those echoes, the once ancient civilization that lived here hollowed this entire cave out in order to search for the jaspers that reside within it. For something that's meant to be temporary, the structures within this are very intricate, and this may be due to the fact that the ancient civilization that used to live here may have carved this out using magic. And if this is the case, this would explain why it was not a burden to make the mine shaft look as intricate as it does. First, we will be walking our way inward, and then we will be taking the Cosmoliners out so you can see the speed difference between the two. Touching more on the ancient civilization that lived here, both the main base of operations as well as various locations throughout here indicate that the previous tribes who lived here had extreme proficiency in magics, and specifically those used here were gravity magics. As we go to the locations hereafter, we will see even more examples of just how powerful this ancient civilization must have been in order to have such profound knowledge in the fields of magic. Here at the end, we get to see a beautiful jasper deposit. And now that we're heading back, we're going to take the Cosmoliners for a quick trip out. we are heading up to Shadefleet. On this floating chunk of rock, we have the gravitational anomaly to thank for exposing the many ores that were otherwise deep underground now are floating above. As we go to the opposite end of this place, down below the Cosmoliners, we can see some gravity generators that were used to unlock this location. This is another source of further technology enhancements for the Cosmoliners that will be getting used in the next planet in a well-done way. Over here near the shore, we're heading to Cape Geras, and it is here that we discover the water levels of this planet are high in EMF levels, or electromagnetic fields. And they are so high, it is stated in lore, going in these waters would be extremely dangerous to any living creature. In real life, electromagnetic fields can be radioactive, but in order to be dangerous to a person, they would have to be at such extremely high levels that even going near these waters would be dangerous, let alone touching them. To give an example of how extreme these magnetic fields would need to be, even something like an MRI device is likely only to raise a person's body temperature by 1 degree Celsius. So you could imagine how intense these magnetic fields would need to be to cause serious damage to a person, let alone the warrior of light. If you're watching in the distance off the coast as well, you can see very far away another gravitational anomaly. Grr, I'm so mad. Let me tell you why I'm mad. Look at all of these structures. They no longer have the silicon on them, but are instead themed after the map's location. And you will see that on the next planet as well. I was really hoping when we came here, we would be slowly building the Loperit's technology over and over, and we would see the solar panels in this location as well as the next location. But sadly, they are just using these various structures as a theming method for each location. You may have seen these various lampposts as well as the fully round ones as we gone through this area. The fully round ones specifically are mentioned to not be lamps, but instead a reason for why we are able to stay on the ground and not go flying into the anomaly nearby. These are using gravitational magics to help keep everything in place. A trick we learned from studying the natives who used to live here, as all of the buildings that you see here were carved and created using gravity magic. As you will see later and earlier when we first arrived on this planet, there was a star chart indicating where the natives of this location were going. And given the technology you see here, it brings to question how they were able to do it. The lore suggests that the gravitational anomalies were not here as a reason for them to escape, but something they created in order to leave the star, completely destroying everything in its wake. Did you know there were stairs for the rooftop? We're taking the stairs, of course. At the top here, we'll get one more daytime glance at the gravitational anomaly, and we'll even get to see some red alert weather in a minute or two. Now we were arriving at Auxesia, and my favorite of all the planets. It is a very beautiful aether-dense planet, and we will see that reflected in the abundance of flora that has taken over the ancient civilization that used to reside here. The day I'm recording this is on the launch day of this patch, so we get to see just how bustling this place really can be. In the motifs among the various structures here, you will see that the Loperites have implemented local timber and treated it with a fire-resistant coating instead of the ones we have previously seen before, such as the silicon and whatever the desert rock texture was supposed to be. I love I love flora greenery colors, and I love violets, if that wasn't obvious by now. So this planet has been quite a treat for me. Here we can see one of the vehicles. This one in particular is a little odd because it has back wheels, but then the front is implied to be a hover car, as we'll see in another example of one that is completely a hover car. I don't exactly know how this thing moves. It can't be very power efficient, or maybe this is the power efficient one. As we go for this planet, if you look off to the sides, you'll realize that we are in the canopies of giant trees. The natives here used powerful magics to flatten the tops of these canopies and built their structures on top of them. And looking down below them, you can even see there are residential locations where the rest of the citizens would be living. Here we are approaching Sproutling Tower, as well as some bizarre looking nested trees throughout here. Here we can see the hover car I was referring to, which on a second glance looks like it might use a lot more energy than the weird hybrid one that I'm unsure how it even moves properly. Though this one doesn't seem very balanced well either. As we approach this Sproutling Tower, it almost looks like a dried waterbed with all these various roots sticking out and this location for what seems like water could flow from. I wonder if in a future build of this planet, we will see water flowing through this location. Heading all the way up to the top here, you can get a nice view of the entire location, as well as this large world tree, or some sort of structure that is clearly very important to this entire planet's function. It reminds me very strongly of the trees we see in Living Memory on the Arrow location. There's a lot of implied technology being shared in this location, as well as other being shared in this location. We can see the tree towers in Living Memory, and with this, we can also see what appears to be elegant-like patterns on some of the various trees in this location, somewhat reminiscent of Aziz La specifically. I swear I've seen these exact trees somewhere, or trees that are very similar to them. So if you know where the glowing marked trees are from, or if you recalled them, I would like to know, because I couldn't find them when I was looking around. You also get these very cute benches up here that we can sit on. I was told they aren't very cute, but I'll leave that up to you to decide. As we cross through many of these Cosmoliners, and as you've probably seen yourself, they feel very chaotic in nature and almost seem like they're going any which way. A reason for this is because a big reason for this is explained that many of the paths we are using are ethereal streams utilized by the previous civilizations that traveled here. And given the intense aether that this planet has, it is very easy for us to manipulate these paths to our use, even so far into the future of them. When I was live streaming this area, it was brought to my attention that the cars might be driving on the left side, and indeed they are. If you observe all the cars here, they are driving on the left side. Encapsulating the perimeter of the giant world tree are these beautiful white trees that we get to see throughout. It doesn't look like we'll be able to go over to any of these locations unless I overlook something, or maybe there's going to be a Cosmoliner that takes us directly to there. which would not be surprising either. In this location, as well as during various red alerts and quests, you will learn that there are many invasive fungi that somehow made their way on our ship to here. Now, I'm not going to say it's Touchingway, but I did find Touchingway in this location touching stuff. Again, conspiracy? What's a conspiracy if there's a fact right in front of us? Now we have a big section to walk, so enjoy the walk. As we reached the summit here, I was exploring this area and found that it looks like behind all of these trees, there is an location that we have yet to unlock. So if you haven't already unlocked this on your server, you can get a little peek of a location ahead of time. Off in the distance here as well, we can see all these dead trees surrounded by this massive crystalline structure. This was showed in the cinematic when we first arrived to this location. So I wouldn't be surprised if we end up going to there somehow as well. Maybe another Cosmoliner or something yet to be seen. In this location, we get a fate that we run into, and this fate helps indicate that a lot of the plants on this planet are being manipulated or have been manipulated at some point to gain different functions than they normally have. The plants here have been manipulated in a way to stunt their growth and prevent them from reaching their full life cycle. You will see this trend of manipulating plants here implied a lot in many of the games. We got extremely lucky here and managed to have a Floracane petal shower occur. Now, these petals might look pretty, but the reality is they are very dangerous. The petal showers here are causing an acceleration of microbial decomposition, meaning anything that seems foreign in this location is going to decompose at a rapid rate due to microbials in these petal showers. Here we can see some more flora being manipulated. You can see a few other locations where it seems like there are metals being incorporated into various plants here. This could be an exaggerated example of hyperaccumulator plants. These are plants in real life that are able to adapt and grow and absorb nutrients in locations with immense amounts of heavy metals. And many of these heavy metals tend to be extremely toxic. Things such as mercury, lead, and zinc. Mercury, lead, cobalt, copper, all kinds of various metals. My thoughts on how these plants are reaching this state could be due to the dense amount of aether that is described on this planet. And it's causing this exaggerated state of hyperaccumulator flora to appear. And with this, there's maybe some inputs from the residents who used to live here, as we've been taught on the previous planets that they are more or less masters of magics. In nice detail with all of this as well, if you have been paying attention to the various structures here, it seems that they are keeping somewhat with their traditional ways, and a lot of these structures appear to be made out of various stones and flora, implying that they have not given fully into their technology and instead are still relying on various magics to help them build their way to the future. While this planet has not fully been explored yet, there's still much more to come from this planet. So if you're watching this when I release the video, I recommend coming back here in the future to explore some of the locations that may or may not have been unlocked by the time this video airs. Thank you for watching this walk along. Up here, another walk along video. Down here, another video. Over here, subscribe. And thank you to my members. And thank you for watching this video. Bye-bye. Bye.